This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
Compared to other software systems on the market, when you choose Regrow as a strategic business partner, you'll get all aspects of regulatory compliance built in. They automate manual tasks, reduce costs, and avoid shortages by creating dynamic workflows that maximize yields and increase profitability for your cannabis business. Think of Regrow as your single pane of glass view into your entire supply chain. So it's time to throw away those whiteboards, throw away the spreadsheets, and stop using email to manage your cultivation, distribution, and manufacturing processes, and talk to Regrow. Visit their website at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Erika Tingey, Head of Product at Backbone. Hello, Erika. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Kevin. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be talking to you today. I know that you're the head of product at Backbone, which is a fully customizable supply chain management platform, which tracks production, compliance, COGS, yields, audit reporting, and real-time data. So that's like the press release boilerplate of what your company does, Erika. But let's first kick it off with your background. So tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into the cannabis industry.
Yeah, so I started my career in software at QuickBooks for desktop. I was a software engineer at the time. And I did that for quite some time. And then I sort of moved around the valley, as lots of people do. And one interesting thing about Intuit is we loved working there so much in the early days that we sort of followed each other around to different jobs. And so every job that I've had since has been with somebody who I worked with at Intuit.
Wow.
So I actually ended up going back to Intuit and worked on QuickBooks Online. And then I moved over to Sage Intacct, which is another mid-tier accounting software. And after that, my friend Vic, who I had worked with at Intuit back in the day, contacted me and said that he was starting this company with a friend of his in the cannabis space. And we talked about it, I would say probably for about a year before they were ready to have me join.
And at that time, did you have any experience with cannabis? Like, were you a user, an advocate, or did you kind of distance yourself from it at that time?
I was around it, but I wasn't really a user. I had a lot of friends who used it frequently. And so, it was a little bit of a jump for me, but, I'm a long time burner. I have been going to Burning Man for about 20 years. And so, none of it was new to me.
Got you. Yeah, I want to talk about that later on in the episode. And for those listening, I know that you hear probably like thunder or like rumbling, but I think those are Erika's cats, right, Erika? So...
Yes, I now have 4 cats. I'm a crazy cat lady.
So at least they don't bark like my dogs, though. So that's the good thing.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Okay, so you talked to the founders who were conceptualizing the idea of Backbone, right, and what it could be. So you decided to take the leap then, right? And so what was your experience kind of first working in the space?
I've always been somebody who's really excited to learn new things. And so even the first day, it was exciting to kind of see how this industry is different from other things that I've worked on. I've worked on inventory systems and accounting systems. But there's something really special about cannabis. It's very community oriented. And a lot of the people who are experts in cannabis haven't necessarily run businesses before, which is one of the things that I love about it. That was one of the things I love about QuickBooks as well, is that we were helping people realize their dreams by taking the burden of tracking finances off their shoulders. And that's kind of the same thing that we're doing here. We're building software so that our customers can get all of the data that they need right at their fingertips, even if they don't know they need that data.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting the way you put it, because I totally agree. Like the cannabis industry seems to be more community oriented, um, as opposed to say other more legacy or longer term industries that have been around, and it's not as stuffy, I feel like, right?
Yeah.
I mean, typical corporate America, there's kind of a certain way you have to act and speak and talk, to maintain the company culture and what the company stands for, and they're all pretty similar in that way, right? There's kind of a mode of operation, but when it comes to cannabis, everyone knows that everyone like is passionate about the plant in some way, right? So there's really no disguising of who you are. Of course, there's that sense of professionalism that you need to bring to work, but it just doesn't seem as stuffy and unauthentic, I guess, you know.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I remember the first time I went to visit a customer, I arrived there and they were all out in the courtyard smoking. And I was like, oh, okay, this is how it is now. I can get used to this.
Right. That's so funny. Yeah, no, it's eye-opening at first, especially when if you're not in that world, or if you live in states where it's not adult use, right? It's just like that's why it
Right.
makes it so interesting in this time that we're living in. So, we hear a lot about data-driven insights, right? And the importance of that when it comes to any type of business that you're operating. So, talk to us about why being having data driven insights to make informed decisions is so even more so important in the cannabis industry, when it comes to the supply chain.
Well, there are two things that are really important to cannabis producers, productivity and costs. Everybody wants to make sure that they're getting the most out of whatever plant they purchase, whether they're trimming it or extracting it. So yields are really important. Being able to tell, when you receive biomass, it has a certain potency. And so being able to tell if you're extracting it, did I actually get all of the THC out of that particular plant? And that has a lot of factors, right? It could be time, it could be the kind of solvent you're using, it could be temperature. And so being able to track all of those things is really important to knowing how to get the most productivity out of your machines and your workers and everything that leads to this finished product that you're going to end up selling.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating about it, right? Is all the components that go into the end product. It's not just, the ingredients or the way in which you're cultivating and growing. It's who's working, the time in which they're spending on particular greenhouses, and the package. I mean, all the manufacturing distribution process. I mean, it's all that stuff into one, right? And I would imagine having a place that kind of helps track and automate some of those processes is beneficial.
Yeah, it really helps. Um, you know, there are a lot of industries that have similar problems, but we're finding that nobody has exactly the same problems. So the kinds of things that cannabis users want to track is a little bit different from everywhere else. And also the costs in cannabis are really variable, based on the time of year and the amount of flower that's available. Costs can fluctuate pretty widely. In California, we have this thing called cultivation tax, which is based on weight, rather than potency. And so the cost of that tax to a particular finished batch can vary also. So being able to really
Cultivation
track.
tax. So that's way over potency. So basically, you're being penalized and taxed more for the more yield you get from your crop.
Right. So you're being taxed on the weight of the harvest versus the finished good. That's not entirely true. It's pretty complex. At the end, when you actually pay the tax, you only pay the tax on actual finished retail goods, the amount of material that went into those.
Gotcha.
But it's a pretty complex tax that's hard to calculate.
Wow. Yeah. And we talk about tracking. That would be perfect example of why tracking would be so important, because it's not, like you said, it's not the yield from the harvest, it's the actual end product. So you'd have to make sure that you're tracking all of those yields all the way down the pipeline.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead and
Oh,
finish
no,
your
it's
thought.
okay. I was just trying to remember where I was.
So what other challenges do operators face? You talked about how cannabis is kind of unique in its own set of issues and problems when it comes to data tracking and monitoring and optimizing their efficiency operations, right? So how does cannabis uh, differentiate than other industries?
Well, the other big thing is compliance. So every state has slightly different compliance rules and different audit rules, and so having all of that information at your fingertips when the auditor shows up at your door and wants to see all of the jars of material that you've been manufacturing, it's really nice to be able to print out a report and say, here it is, here's everything I have. Oh yeah, these things are on this shelf, and here's exactly what I did. That also holds for, if you have to do a recall. So being able to know everything that came from this particular batch, so that all of the downstream materials can be notified that they had a problem.
Got you. So yeah, obviously by state, different regulations, policies, we have to compensate for those when operating in those states, and that technology needs to adhere to those regulations.
That's right. And every state has a different track and trace software that reports to the government. A lot of places it's metric, some places it's BioTrack. And so, everybody has to be able to report the information that that particular state wants to know, which in some cases is slightly different.
Mhm. What would you say are some basic steps that some cannabis companies or operators could take to become more efficient in their operations?
The biggest thing is really to look at the data. So look at the analytics that you get out, and make sure that, to start with, compare different batches to see, is that one batch more efficient than another, and then drill
And
down
when
into
when
the
you
research.
say when you say batches, you're talking about like the actual crops, right? What you're harvesting. Is that what you mean? Or
Well, there are a lot of different stages. Backbone focuses a lot on the manufacturing piece. So whether it's processing into jars or extracting and making edibles or big parts, the cultivation process, I think there are a lot of things that you can do to vary your yields, whether it's what fertilizers you use, when you de-leaf. And the other thing that's really complicated about that is it varies based on strain. So different strains do well in different conditions. And some strains produce really well and some produce less, but maybe are more potent. So understanding all of those details of the tracking process is really important.
got you. And what insights are y'all seeing right now within the supply chain currently?
One of the biggest things is, well, there are many. One is lead time. So being able to order the kinds of things the supplies that you need at the right time so that you have, the labels and the vape carts you need in order to produce your finished product. Also, depending on the time of year, ability to procure biomass, flower or plants or fresh frozen, whatever you need to procure, it can be hard or easy, just depending on, how much has been harvested recently. So we've seen, quite a few people who have multiple procurement officers who are out there trying to get flower when they need it.
Wow. Anything like related to, like, say, the pandemic or post-pandemic insights, and maybe some trends that you would predict to see in 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, this is one of those industries where people really can't work from home. They have to be gathered together. And at least in California, cannabis is essential. So a lot of the manufacturing facilities have stayed open. We've seen with our customers, occasionally they'll have a COVID outbreak and have to send everybody home for a little while. Um, but other than that, we really haven't seen much impact. Everybody's pretty careful when they're working, and it's important to everyone to have a lot of availability of cannabis out there. So
Right. Yeah, we saw the consumption rates increase dramatically, during the height of the lockdown period and whatnot, and people actually kind of making the switch from alcohol to cannabis, which was interesting to see.
yeah, the relaxation properties, I think, really are great at this time when so many different things are making a lot of us really anxious.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So tell me, what is it like to be a veteran burner of how many years did you say? 10 years?
20 years.
20 years. So, okay, I've always like I admit I've wanted to go. I mean, I've just never got the opportunity. I've seen videos, I've seen the pictures. Like, what's it like? How long did you stay? Like what was the whole experience like?
Yeah, for the past, 10 or 12 years, I usually go out there for about 2 weeks. I'm involved in a camp, and so I go out to build.
So what that means is you're out there for 2 weeks. When you first get there, you're building the community in which you're gonna live for the next 2 weeks. So the shelter, you're setting up tents. Like, what are you building exactly?
Yeah, so, I tented out there for about 17 years, which was fine. But more recently, I got a trailer, so that makes it a lot nicer. I just get out there and I'm all set up already. The things that we build are we have a music camp. And so we build, our stage and our DJ booth and the bar, and then we have a circus tent where we hold workshops. And then 2 years ago now, we actually a couple of our members bought these airline stairs. The stairs that send you up to the airplane.
Oh
We
yeah.
got two of those, and they built a bridge between them. So we had those two with this enormous bridge with sofas on it, so that you could look out over the whole playa.
Wow, that would be an amazing view, I can imagine.
It was pretty great. Yeah, and I've definitely seen it change over the years. The first time I went, I think there were maybe 15,000 people, and the last time I went, it was over 80,000.
Over 80,000. And in that dramatic increase, of people attending, like how has the vibe changed at all? Has it been the same or
The internal vibe, so the community building, which actually, now that I think about it, is kind of similar to how cannabis is. Everybody trying to help each other, and really a lot of open communication and friendliness. So that has not changed. There always were sort of the weekend partiers who would come just for the party. But
right?
those of us who are out there for a long time, it's a city.
Yeah.
Um, the biggest thing that's changed is actually law enforcement. So there
More
are
law enforcement present or
a lot more
really?
law enforcement, a lot of different agencies, and they are pretty rigorous.
In terms of what, confiscating drugs?
Yeah, they do a lot of searches.
Wow. That's surprising to me because I when you first said that, I'm like, they're not going for like, any type of violent threats or anything like that, right? Because everybody's pretty
No,
friendly and
never.
getting along. So wow, so they're really targeting that area to confiscate narcotics and drugs. That's interesting. What is the main draw for people that want to go there? Is it the community, the communal aspect of living out on the land and building for yourself and having that kind of, trader type mentality, or is it spiritual, or is it something, what is it? Or a
I
mix?
really think it's different for everybody. Um, and it's a city of 80,000 people. During that week, it's the third largest city in Nevada.
Wow.
And so it's different. Yeah, you can find anything you need. So some people go out there and they're out during the day, and they're looking at the art, and other people, they stay out all night and they're dancing. So yeah, it really depends.
Wow. And what part of Nevada? What city is it?
It's not a city, so it's based out in the Black Rock Desert.
Okay.
It's its own city. It's called Black Rock City, and it has a population of, like I said, 80,000. So
Wow.
that's why it's the third largest city.
But you're saying 80,000 when Burning Man is happening, not year
Yes.
round.
No,
Right.
no, only for that week. It's the third largest city.
Right. So it's just kind of vacant land when the
Yep.
okay. Wow. Yeah, well, if my wife and I ever like manage to get out there, I'm definitely hitting you up for, tips and what to bring, essential items,
Yep. I'm happy to help.
yeah, I appreciate that. So tell me another interesting thing I think about you is are you into glass blowing?
Yeah. I actually haven't done it since the pandemic started. But yes, I was studying glass blowing. I will tell you, I'm still a student. It's not easy at all. I ended up with a whole bunch of clear, misshapen vases that I just recently got rid of.
Well, I asked because I recently got hooked on that show Blown Away on Netflix.
Yes, I love that show.
And I mean, I mean, of course, just like anything, right? There's a community, there's a people that are really into it. And I'm just learning that world, and it's just so fascinating, the accuracy and the delicacy of the whole process, and how you can blow it up, with that tube you put in the glory hole so that it kind of sets. It's fascinating, so how long have you been doing that?
I only did it for probably 2 years before I stopped. Um, and I think some people, when they start doing it, they do it every day, and so they progress pretty quickly. I, of course, was working full time, so I was doing it once a week.
Right.
So it's been a slow ramp up. And the funny thing is, with those experts on the show, like, even for them, sometimes things just break
Right.
because
Right.
it's such a delicate medium. You have to get it exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, they literally tap the metal pole. Like once the glass is done, it's just a little tap and the whole piece comes off very, very easily, So that's why I mentioned delicacy, and just, the attention to detail is incredible. So maybe one day we'll see you on that show. I don't know. Maybe next couple of years, if you do it full time.
Yeah, I might have to switch careers if I were going to do that.
Well, stay in cannabis for now. It's a good place to be.
It is. It's a great place.
Yes. Well, hey, Erica, what do you want to leave the audience with? Anything on your mind, or any other topics that you want to cover?
Um, going back to what we were saying earlier about the cannabis community, I think you hit the nail on the head talking about authenticity. I've seen so many people bring that to their work, especially around social equity. So many folks have been impacted by the war on drugs, and the history of cannabis, and it's great to see so many people really invested and making sure that we don't make the same mistakes of some other industries where outside people came in and just kind of extracted all the value out of it. It's nice to see that most of the folks that we're working with really are invested in making sure that they bring back to the community.
I 100% agree, and it's encouraging to see these some of these top performing companies, multi-state operators in the U.S. step up and actually make that front and center, one of their missions and one of their value propositions within the company, because as you said, there's been people that have, their lives have been ruined, they've been locked up. And we're starting to undo those wrongs, but we always need to keep them front and center, because it wasn't always like this. It wasn't always great. There was a time where it affected a lot of people. I've had Evelyn LaChapelle on the podcast from Last Prisoner Project, Dante
Yeah.
West, and just hearing their stories. Evelyn, in which she didn't even, I don't, and Dante as well, not even a prior history, and no consideration of that at all. Just kind of throwing the book at them and saying, here, here's 7 to 25 years, which is crazy. So I think that's a valid point you bring up, and it's good that we're talking about it.
Yeah, the inequity in the enforcement of those laws, it's really painful to look back on and see the impact that that's had. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that's well said, Erica. I've really appreciated your time today and your insights regarding how, the importance of data in the cannabis space, and then of course your cool experiences at Burning Man and your potential to become blown away in your glass blowing skills.
We'll
So,
see.
hey, where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, so our website is backboneiq.com. And anyone who's interested in a demo can contact us through there. I think we're also on LinkedIn and Facebook, so come reach out.
Boom, there you go. Well, thanks again, Erica, and thank you all for listening.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kevin.